Hi, I'm going to speak about emotions and the development of teams. And this is part of an ongoing series to look at emotions in the development of organizations. Now, to start this discussion, as I have in previous videos, I'm going to refer to this ubiquitous pattern of sustainable progress that is represented by a seed becoming a flower. So, this is a sequence that occurs in time, and there are three phases to this. There's the seed phase that represents the impulse to maintain the status quo. I'll refer to that as the physical. There's a second phase when germination begins, of rapid growth, often assertive or even aggressive in nature, and I'll refer to that as the vital phase. And there's a third stage in which the intent that was inherent in the seed becomes apparent and emerges as a flower. I'll refer to that as the mental phase. Now, this is a pattern of sustainable progress that's ubiquitous, and I believe that it is true regardless of the type of organization and regardless of the complexity of the organization. This pattern also occurs at any single point in time in space as a tightly bonded structure that has three components to it: the physical, the vital, and the mental. And when I had spoken about emotions and the structure of emotions, so this is occurring in space, then the vital component brings to attention this feeling. And without this feeling, one wouldn't be motivated to really try and understand what is going on, but the feeling can be painful enough that one is motivated to look at what's going on behind it. And this draws attention, so this feeling can often draw attention to a driver. And the driver is the mental component. And when awareness is put upon it, then the space that it's taking up, so the physical component, the space, begins to dissolve, and our processing capacity and abilities are freed up for something else to come into its place. Now, when we look at the kinds of states of beings or feelings that a person can experience, similarly, this model of the flower, of the seed becoming the flower, is useful. And there's three distinct phases here. And if we look at this, and I looked at it in my thoughts from a couple of weeks ago, but there's potentially negative and positive feelings in each phase. And if we looked at the physical level and the kinds of feelings that emerge, then there's things like weakness or inertia or boredom, depression, and so on. And then when we looked at, say, the kinds of states of beings that might occur in the vital phase, is things like fear, hesitation, anger, irritation, selfishness, and so on. And when we look at it in the mental space, it's states of being like anxiety, mental noise, obsessive or compulsive thoughts, perturbing thoughts, and so on. And what these feelings or states of being really drawing attention to are the bonded structures that exist within us that are taking up space and processing capacity and filtering our experience of ourselves and others. And when we do the work to begin to dissolve these structures by drawing attention on the driver, then these negative states can be converted into their opposites or positive states. So, for example, in the physical realm, on the positive side, we may experience feelings of strength, stability, flexibility, well-being, and so on. In the vital realm, we might experience states of being or feelings like courage and assured action, a sense of calm, a sense of some kind of love, and a sense of selflessness, And similarly, when we look at the positive side in the mental realm, we may experience feelings of peace and the ability to synthesize thoughts much better, to have a holistic view of things, and a sense of well-being again. And so there's a realm of different states of being that we may experience depending on where we're at and depending on how much work we've done in ourselves. And this, in a sense, becomes a compass or a dashboard, and it can have a lot of value in understanding where a team is at too. So typically, when a team comes together, you may ask them, how are you doing as a team? And you may get an answer that's more lip service. Oh, we're doing very well. We've coalesced. We have been able to deliver on some complex products and so on. But to really understand where a team is at, there is no better substitute, or the acid test is to understand what individuals or the team as a whole is feeling. And so if we take this dashboard and look at these different realms and the negative and the positive in each area, then when the team first comes together, it's going to be, more often than not, it's going to be experiencing a reality where people are operating very safely. There's a lot of status quo, there's inertia, there's weakness in that people are not really expressing who they are or speaking out. There's not a lot of positive interaction. Again, it might be interaction that's more on the surface than deep. And so there's a preponderance of this state of being, even though there may be many different states that are occurring in the team as a whole, but really the intensity and the duration of states that are strongest are going to be in this phase here, the physical and the negative. And perhaps in common terminology, we may refer to this as the forming stage of a team. Now, if the work is done and the team moves beyond this, what's going to happen next is that the team is going to migrate more towards this stage here. So this is going to become the prepondering stage. So it's the vital negative. And here, the reality, it's perhaps the common word for it is storming, where people are stepping out of themselves, but there's no order. So there can be a lot of aggression, there can be a lot of anger, fear, irritation, a lot of haste. People are just trying to prove themselves, but in no orchestrated fashion. And that very commonly is where a team would go next. Now there's a lot of work that needs to be done for a team to move beyond this stage. But if that work is done, what we can see is similarly, using the same dashboard, what we will begin to experience is more positive. So for example, the team might be driven more by the positive mental, by a component of the positive vital, by the positive physical, even though there are still quite a few instances of the negative stage. And this has to be because if we think about the work that this is drawing to attention, these are very strong states that are here, things like fear and anger and haste and selfishness. And there's a lot of bonded structures that are coming to the surface. And if the team is able to dissolve these, either individually or collectively, then there's a quantum leap at this point. So the team is going from one level to the next, and it's a huge difference. And perhaps we can refer to this stage as the norming stage. And similarly, if the team continues on this trajectory of development, then if we look at the dashboard of the different feelings, what we're going to see is a much higher state that's driven from here, so the mental positive, and there's going to be also a vital positive and a strong physical positive, with some instances of the negative. But the point is that at this point, there are structures in place, there's a kind of a collectivity in place that's able to manage the negative and is able to really be driven by the common objectives that the team has as a whole. So here we can say that the team is operating at a performing stage. Now, interestingly, if we consider this from the flower model, then what we see is that the team itself has gone through this trajectory of from the seed to the stalk to the flower, and the critical point really was this stage here, the storming stage, where in fact most teams arrested, the development is arrested, because it calls into attention very strong structures, both bonded structures, both at the individual and at the team level, and it requires a great amount of work to be able to break these bonded structures. But once that is done, then the acceleration of the team can continue in a more holistic way.